Hello, and thanks for watching. The thumbnail is a bit clickbaity, but unfortunately also true. I want to touch on the rules around knives, the UK law and what it means and how it causes confusion and restrictions. I do a lot of filming and walking and needed a tool that has a few functions: a small knife, small pliers, flat and Phillips head screwdrivers, etc. Amazon had a great little multi-tool with good ratings and a low price. Because I didn't need a critical tool, I was happy to buy cheap, as I would not put the tool under any sort of heavy stresses. When the tool arrived, I was pleasantly surprised. It was a great little thing, but I soon realized I won't be able to use it outdoors or carry it around because the blade locks. For those outside the UK and some in the UK, I will explain. The UK Knife or Offensive Weapons Act states you are not allowed to carry in public a knife that where the blade is longer than 3 inches, locks in place, so basically meaning that you can't immediately fold it back without pressing a button or something, or opens automatically, so by a push of a button, or it's spring loaded, or has any sort of mechanical thing that allows it to open automatically by the press of a button, or if it falls out by gravity, anything like that is not allowed. So I'm talking about blades here purely because it relates to what I'm trying to discuss. So you're not allowed to carry any of these items. Basically any item that can be deemed by the police as that can be used, they can deem it to be used as an offensive weapon. This extends to any object that can be perceived to be used as an offensive weapon, like crowbars, screwdrivers, etc. So anything, even mace, things like that. So these laws came about because the UK had a massive knife crime problem, especially in the cities. So this is not legal advice or education, so I implore you to read the Offensive Weapons Act yourself, and that I am talking about this as a result of my own kind of research and reading. It's all there. You can, find this very easily from the government sites, from where the laws are placed. So this was basically the tool I bought off Amazon, and as you can see, it's the perfect little tool to carry around. It has lots of nice functions, especially functions I really needed. But unfortunately, it has a liner lock, and therefore, so obviously, with good reason, you can carry this. But I'm not interested in having that discussion with a policeman or in the court when they say, "Look, I can't be bothered with that. It's just too much hassle." So I'm just going to leave it at home. So the law basically makes it impossible to not be charged with an offensive weapon act, because if you are found to be carrying an item that can be perceived to be used offensively, you are in breach of this act. This puts into question anyone who carries a tool for work, is carrying it to and from a place of work, stores it in their vehicle, forgets it on themselves, etc. The court will require you to prove that you have had a very good reason to have such an item on you. How does this relate to me? Well, although the multi-tool is extremely convenient to me, I doubt I could argue in court that I need it. The reason I say that is because I could carry a bunch of different tools that do the same thing and that does not have a locking knife on it. However, as you can see, this is a convenience and a useful thing to have it all in one. The locking blade and one-hand opening of it makes it convenient and safe. Well, the reason I'm saying it makes it safe is like a lot of reasons to have an opening knife is so that the blade is away, right? So firstly, it's completely legal to have a fixed blade anyway on you. Anyway, so forget about that for a second. So if you do anything where you require a knife, there's a good possibility that you actually need to use it one-handed, because the other hand will be holding or fixing or adjusting something. So that the ease of use is that you can open this with one hand and you can close it with one hand, but you also have the safety of the blade locking so that it doesn't close on your hand when you're using it. Because it is entirely legal to have, I forgot to mention this, but you are perfectly in your right to carry without question, like a classic typical Swiss Army knife. And the reason is very simple: the blade is short enough, so it falls underneath the 3 inches. But also it has a slip joint. A slip joint is basically where the knife closes immediately. You just push it back and it closes. So they usually are, without question, fine to carry as long as they fall in within those parameters. Now, the reason I don't want to use that is because it is entirely inconvenient to me. I need to be able to use it with one hand, which you can't do with a classic Swiss Army knife. And the fact that the blade can close up on you in certain circumstances means that I could cut my fingers, which I'm not really interested in doing. So before I continue with my criticism, I want to make it clear that I know exactly why these laws came into existence. And in general, I kind of agree. I'm also not proposing a reversal of this situation at all, or like a, complete unban of some sort. That is not what this is about. But here is the disconnection. This is what this channel is all about. This is a law that has been written in contrast with how we, the public, perceive the justice system to work. In this case, it is worded and framed that when called upon, you essentially have to prove your innocence rather than the prosecutor having to prove your guilt. Now, obviously, you're guilty of carrying it, but surely the whole point of banning such an item is that you are taking away offensive weapons off the street. Now, an offensive weapon is only offensive, in my opinion, and I think many other people's opinion, is when it is actually used as an offensive weapon, because they make their own point like that as well, because they put things like screwdrivers under the same thing. There's no way that's an offensive weapon unless you choose to use it as an offensive weapon. For example, if you say, oh, I'm carrying it to protect myself, or I'm carrying it to harm somebody. So it is pretty much an object which is then becomes an offensive weapon by choice, by the person who's carrying its choice. So essentially what they're doing is they're writing a law which makes you having to basically prove that, hey, look, I'm not a criminal, I'm not intending on doing any harm, I am innocent, which is not how the law is supposed to be set up. It's very vague and open to interpretation, like so many laws nowadays, which means it is subject to the police officer who stopped you and searched you. It's up to their mood, their own personality, if they want to give you a hard time or not, or if they want to be pedantic when there would never be any harm done. The court's understanding or discretion. I neglect the safety of the user in favor of a possibility, so I'll explain. A lock and blade is safer as it won't accidentally close on you and your fingers while working, yet it is banned because of the slim chance that the user might want to get rowdy with it. So what I'm trying to say is a locking blade is safer for the user to use, yet it is banned at the expense of that safety because of that small, slight possibility that, you might be that type of person who wants to use it as a offensive weapon. Banning knives also takes away a very normal everyday tool from everyday use from the public. I don't want to relate this to the gun bans because it's apples and bananas here, right? So the freedom to have a small useful tool on you is not the same as the freedom to carry a devastatingly deadly weapon on you. I'm talking about a small pocket knife which can maybe lock for your own safety. It is useful in many situations during the day for many people, obviously not everyone. Banning pocket knives, a multi-tool, has not curbed knife crime to a real degree anyway, looking at current stats. So I am happy to stand under correction, but the looking at the stats over the years, knife crime hasn't really fallen. Now, these here seem to be about homicide, so actually death caused by knives, and as you can see, it's pretty much awful all the way through, right through knife bans and everything. And I think the difference here between guns and knives is very simple. Banning guns is not a bad idea because a gun can, just one person with a gun can do so much harm. And so trying to get rid of as many as possible off the street for illegitimate uses is to me makes complete and utter sense. I personally feel that people should be able to own and do what they please, but that's a personal thing. And I'll get to this later, because I feel like the problem with all of these things is that we're taking away people's choices. The need of the few overshadow the need of the many, their right to do and go on with their days as they please. And essentially there isn't really much of a benefit. So when it comes to gun crime, it is very obvious that if you look at the social setup of many countries, and there are many countries who are allowed to own guns where there is hardly any gun crime or accidents or deaths compared to the US. The US is unique in that entirely. So there is that distinction. However, back to the knife crime, I think a knife is a very different thing, that if you ban it, you very clearly have that situation where those who want to do bad will use it regardless. It is irrelevant if it's banned or not, but you're essentially taking away the convenience for everybody else to try and stave that off. So personally, I would like to see a few things happen. So small, reasonable pocket knives and multi-tools taken off the act. I would like it to be, I think what I'm more getting at is I'd like this to not be so interpretable. So there are more clear rules. Look, you do something wrong with it, you are properly done, by the law. Instead of just saying, oh, look, you might have something on you that might be used in some possible situation, and therefore you are now, a criminal. Knife crime and violent offenses prosecuted more effectively. That's what I'm getting at. There's way too many stories. I was listening to a podcast not a few days ago, which kind of sparked this again. It was like knife crime and violent crime is on the rise, and a lot of it actually has to do with how it's reported, but the more worrying thing behind it is like the tiny percentage of cases that actually go through courts and are actually successfully prosecuted when it comes to violent crimes and stuff. So it seems like, oh, we'll ban knives and small little locking knives and multi-tools to try and prevent crime, but actually it doesn't do anything. And at the same time, when somebody is actually charged with an actual crime, or a crime is reported, they hardly ever get their comeuppance. So the legal system sits on this edge where they're vilifying somebody that's not done anything yet, and at the same time the people who have done something really heinous are not necessarily getting the judgments that they deserve. So knife crime and violent offenses prosecuted more effectively, and more work by the government to fix the underlying problem that creates crime and knife crime in the first place. And this is probably what annoys me the most in this world. So many laws are created and are just superficial plasters. The governments never have the interest or the resources or the patience to really deal with the actual social issues that cause a lot of the problems. If we're talking about drugs or gun crime or knife crime, it is always the same. We'll ban the thing, but we won't actually look at our society and see what's actually causing us, because the majority of people tend to be good. And most of the time, obviously there are bad apples, but most of the time people are actually pushed into desperacy where they end up becoming criminals. And that's never really addressed properly because it takes too much money and care. And so they just take the plaster. So the way I've written it was, laws like the Offensive Weapon Act seem to me to be nothing more than plasters to cover symptoms, rather than the political will to solve the cause. It is also an easy PR exercise to make it look like they care and are doing something about it. So if there's a massive issue crime-wise, then they'll make some silly laws and then they'll go around saying, oh, look what we've done to, help society. Whereas they've done nothing to help society. They've only put a few plasters on, which only work to a very small degree and don't have much longevity. The price of all this is taking away freedoms from the vast majority of law-abiding, non-violent citizens and inconveniencing them. Let me know your thoughts below, and there is a link below to the multi-tool which I purchased. It is an affiliate link, so I'll get a kickback, and if you buy it, it helps me out, but obviously please don't carry it in public without any good reason. And I would really urge anybody who's kind of possibly even remotely agrees with what I'm saying, is don't be stupid. The laws are the laws, and we don't want anybody to get into trouble. Like I said before, I do understand to a degree where this whole overzealous law comes from, and possibly there were good intentions in the past, but I suppose it's time for it to go. So there's the Offensive Weapons Act. There's a lot of statistics to be found. In fact, there's just some statistics came out for 2022 and earlier. And this was the multi-tool that I unfortunately now only use in the house, where I have all my other tools. So I spent £12 for nothing. But thank you for listening.